If you asked anyone to name the biggest shock of the WSL this season, they'd be hard-pressed to answer anything other than Brighton's rise up the table. But Brighton have been absolutely phenomenal under new manager Dario Vidosic, and in this video we analyse what he's doing, how they're doing it, and why it works. This is how Brighton are shocking everyone in the WSL. Alright then, let's talk about Dario Vidosic. Now before we get into this, I just want to quickly credit someone who helped with the research of this video. Journalist David Astill, we appreciate massively what he does. He is the lead women's football writer at Total Football Analysis, and he also writes on his own Substack. So go and check him out, because he helped massively with the research for this. We're going to be talking about Vidosic today, talk about what he does at Brighton. Harry, very good start to life.
Yes.
On the south coast.
Yeah, very impressed by Vidosic's start, and I think it's more impressive when you factor, I think it's the transformation that he has performed at Brighton, and you have to give him a lot of credit for that. It was not an easy job. I think it was one of the jobs in the summer that was eyed up as being a very, very difficult prospect. You had another squad that had been under a big turnover, and it's the type of job that isn't very attractive to managers. But Vidosic, he saw his opportunity and he's taking it with to the extreme, and he's done very, very well. And I think for Brighton, it's been a breath of fresh air, because it was a really tough, especially last season was very, very difficult, and they look like a completely different new side this year. So you have to give Vidosic credit. He's a manager that, he's the type of manager that needed a big opportunity in the big leagues to prove himself, and he's doing exactly that at the moment.
Yeah, all right. Let's talk about who Vidosic is then. Obviously, Vidosic coming over from Melbourne City. I think a lot of people know that. But he's he's born in Croatia, moved over to play a lot of football in Australia, played for various different clubs, played a bit for Melbourne City. I think he also played for Adelaide. And then he ended up, at the end of his career, he was playing for Melbourne City. And then he became the assistant manager at Melbourne City Women. And eventually the manager. He was the assistant manager under his dad, which is quite a nice story. And then his dad moved to coach the men's side, and he became the MCFC women's coach at just 35 years old. So a very young manager, but someone who's been involved in football, obviously, as a player and now as a coach for quite a while. So that started in 2022. Immediately, he burst onto the scene as a very exciting young manager. This was not a huge surprise given his pedigree in the men's game, given how good a player he was, that it does translate quite nicely into coaching if you are a top manager. I mean, just ask Pep Guardiola, for example. It can translate quite nicely. And I think, obviously, that led to then Melbourne City playing very well. That's why he was so highly regarded. In his first season, they finished third, which is quite... I mean, they finished second the season before, so a bit of a downgrade, but you're always going to have a bit of a downgrade when moving from one manager to the next. But in the second season, they went and won the title in 23-24, and ultimately that's what got Brighton interested. That's why they went and poached him this summer. So he did very well out there, and we're seeing a lot of what made him very successful in Melbourne translate over to Brighton, because in the A-League, he averaged 62.87 possession, which is absolutely ridiculous. 62% possession, that's ludicrous numbers. And they really became a team that nobody wanted to face. And I think that's why Brighton, who've been on this path now for about 5 years of trying to push up the WSL, have settled on him, and that's why it's worked.
Yeah, very much so. As you say, his understanding of the game, because he was a player, and played in a decent quality of level, that he has come in and his understanding of the game is incredible. Translate that to a manager and it makes it, he's even better because he understands everything across the whole pitch, across the board. And I think to have a young manager with the depth of understanding and the knowledge that he brings is an incredible, useful tool. And that possession is unplayable. If your side has 62% of the ball, it's very difficult to lose the game because the other team just can't do anything because they don't have the ball. And that is so useful because, especially when you see it Brighton aren't the best team in the WSL, but if Vidosic can get them on the ball, if they have the ball, they can't concede. So, it's one of those where he's done really well because the jump to the A-League to WSL is a big one. And obviously it's not as big as the men's game, but it is still pretty big. And then he's done very well to adjust and adapt and really punish the sides in the WSL with the way he wants to play.
Yeah, so he did very well out in the A-League. He came over to a Brighton side that were in a very interesting situation when he joined because obviously they finished 9th last season despite huge backing in the transfer market, and it was all part of this plan to get Brighton into the top four, to go and compete with the big sides, and it just just didn't work. Once again, we saw Melissa Phillips obviously was the manager last season. It just never really worked out. Tactically, they were never great. Elizabeth Turland managed to keep them in the league pretty much, and the fact Bristol City weren't very good, they both contributed massively. But I think given the outlay that they put into this side, given the calibre of players they went and picked up, I think there would have been a lot of disappointment behind last year's 9th place finish. And obviously following the sacking of Melissa Phillips, Brighton had 5 permanent... Vidosic would be the 5th permanent head coach since Hope Powell departed in October 2022.
Wow.
And that is a very short period of time to have 5 managers in.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really important they got this one right. And it definitely feels like so far that they have.
Yeah, very much so. As you say, it was a very, very difficult time last season that... They had their overhauls, even the last couple of years, overhauls with the squad, overhauls with who was on the touchline. But now they look to have settled. There's another big window where they bought in, obviously, Vidosic has come in, they've bought, they've another big window in terms of players as well. And it seems to be clicking. And you mentioned there, obviously, Turland practically kept them in the league last season. But even without her, they're thriving more, and I think that was a massive thing, because going into this season, it was very much like, yes, Vidosic looks like a top coach, yes, the squad, they've brought in some really good players, but they've lost Ellie Turland, and that could be detrimental to their season. So far, though, they've been brilliant finding the back of the net, and Vidosic has got them playing some really nice football.
Well, I remember doing our Brighton preview, obviously, before the start of the campaign, and saying that they've lost Turland, so while a lot of people were predicting Brighton to do really well, I thought they may be a bit... I don't think that they would be as good as people were saying. People were predicting them to be this as high as they are right now, and props to them, but I thought they'd be just below that. Obviously, at that time, they hadn't signed Nikita Parish yet, and I think that has made a huge difference, because while she isn't an out-and-out striker, she's still a really potent goal scorer, Nikita Parish. So I think that's made a huge difference. Obviously, Kiko Seike came in, had a fantastic debut. She's gone a little bit quiet since then, and I don't think we'll see her regularly scoring hat-tricks, but she is a player who, or at least yet, but I think she's a player who will develop massively and already looks a good talent. I think, the addition to Frank Kirby, a fantastic footballer, Helena Kankovic, another brilliant player. I think they've added a lot to this side, and obviously that's been noticeable in the way they've played. So let's talk about how they're playing then. Now, I think it's impossible to watch a Brighton game and not notice that everything they do revolves around keeping the ball. And this is very Vidosic. We know how much Vidosic rates possession. We saw that obviously in the A-League, with his high possession football. And a lot of it starts with the build-up. So in Vidosic's build-up, and we noticed this a lot in the Manchester City game, they like to play off their own penalty area. It's very brave football. They often build up in either a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. And it's very interesting to see what they do. So they like to get wide with the fullbacks, and we see that obviously a lot with Poppy Pattinson getting forwards. And often we see it misprofiled as a back three. Whereas actually what they're doing is, because Pattinson gets so high, it looks like a back three, but the right back does tend to get forwards occasionally. And then they drop both of the pivot players in and split the centre-halves wide. So this gives you, obviously, 2 players dropping in who are a little bit more comfortable on the ball. This tends to be Vicky Lasadas, and Olis Lagers, I think, also drops in there. Very, very comfortable in possession. It gives you the centre-halves who pull wider, so you've got options there to pass out of, and it also drags the opposition midfielders forward and then gives you space to work into. And that's what we see them do a lot of, are these short passes in these deep areas. They wait for the space to open up, and then they can move the ball quickly. And they can execute some nice passes. And we've seen a lot of times them be able to play through oppositions, and then they've just got loads of space to operate in, because the opposition push up so high onto them, because they don't know how to deal with this Brighton system. They end up then just leaving loads of space in behind. And we saw this, especially first game of the season against Everton. There's so much space for Kiko Seike in behind. There's so much space for your creative players in those half spaces, in just behind that back line. There was so much space, and I think that's what tore Everton apart. Everton had no idea how to handle that. And I think that's why they've been so good against every team in the league this season. It's because no one in their WSL knows how to handle this. Not even Manchester City did, really. On a different day, if Brighton had taken their chances, they'd have scored a goal. Because City were committing to the press, Brighton were playing through it, and then there was space.
Yeah.
And I know City aren't, City's midfield is practically non-existent this season, because they've got Yui Hasegawa, and that is it, because everyone else presses forward. But there is still so much space in there that they managed to create by pulling out Jess Puck, by pulling out Vivian Miedemar. And it wasn't for individual quality, City probably would have lost that game. So I thought tactically Vidosic did really well. And that, it does pose the question of, will Vidosic get a big move? Because if United are looking at moving on Mark Skinner, or Arsenal still haven't got a manager, is Vidosic someone that will be in the consideration of these top sides?
Potentially so, because as you say, he's got a system for me that can compete against the very best, and that for Brighton, that's absolutely incredible, because what it means is that they can go use this system, go to the weaker sides in the league and play them off the park like they did against Everton. But it also means that they can go to, away to City, go to host Brighton at home and host Man United. They can't host themselves. Host Man United at home and take the game to them. And and it's refreshing to see, to be honest, because you see too many sides that will just sit in a very deep low block against Man City and just wait to concede. Even Aston Villa went for the game, scored, and then just went defensive. Liverpool got a goal, sat back Brighton. They took the game to City. Yes, they didn't win the game, get anything from it, but they did very, very well to take the game to City, to challenge City, and to cause a lot of problems. Did the same at Man United, and they reaped the rewards. They took a point away from one of the side who is still unbeaten in the league. So I do like this from Brighton, and as you say, for Vidosic, if you've got a tactic that could compete at the top level, then definitely you can get a more impressive job. And in terms of the thing for Brighton will be is that if they are in that top 4 fight, then where's the jump for Vidosic? If Brighton are in that conversation with the big sides in the league, then he's already got his big move. Brighton is the big move. They'll be one of the big sides. But definitely, I think, as you say, your Arsenals, your United, I definitely think European teams, if they are to lose a manager, Vidosic could be a hot prospect. But right now, I think what Brighton have got to do is make sure they're up there. Because if Vidosic and Brighton are at the sharp end of the table, there's no incentive for Vidosic to leave because he's already in the big leagues.
Yeah, there is one thing that means they're able to compete with teams at the top and teams at the bottom is their tactical flexibility, especially out of possession. In possession, it's all very much the same. No matter the opponent, it's going to be controlled and patient build up, and then when they get in high areas, it's these quick, short combinations between a couple of players, often triangles to get around players. And that's how they tend to operate. But out of possession, we tend to see a lot of tactical flexibility. They switch between high pressing and mid block. And so for anyone that isn't familiar with those terms, high pressing refers to pushing your forward players very aggressively up against the opposition's back line when they're trying to build up, and then you put a lot of pressure on them, try and win that ball back. Mid block is just sitting off a little deeper, and we saw this in the Manchester City game, which I really liked because City are so good at playing through you. But the amount of times City gave the ball away because they didn't know what to do. When Brighton just sat off them a bit, they didn't have any idea what to do because if you're expecting a player to come onto you and then they don't, where is your passing option? What they like to do is expect players to press up onto them, and then they'll wait for space to open up in behind, and they'll exploit that space. Manchester City, Brighton didn't, and it was that stubbornness just to not press that meant that City, for a lot of the game, just didn't know how to play out against them. Eventually they managed to, because they are Manchester City and they adapted to the situation. But it shows Brighton have got tools to play against different sides. And I think it's been so effective this season, their pressing. We saw, again, it's another thing we saw against Everton. They kept forcing Everton into mistakes with their high pressing, looking to generate those turnovers in good areas, because it gives you these really good opportunities, and it's why they've been so effective in front of goal this season. I think they'll continue to be so effective in front of goal this season. I'll be very intrigued to see how they match up against teams like Chelsea. They've got Chelsea in a couple of weeks' time. And I think that'll be really interesting. I think they play Arsenal as well soon.
Yeah.
They for me, will be huge games because they're two sides who are quite good playing out from the back. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how Brighton press against that and how they manage to, whether they can create those turnovers high up the field. We've seen Arsenal obviously be affected by Hairkin's press this season, and I think Brighton could be very similar. If Brighton push aggressively onto Arsenal, I think they could win the ball back quite a few times, then we'll see what happens from there. But this flexibility just means they're able to compete with a lot of different teams, and it's why Brighton are where they are at the moment. It's why they're fourth in the league, and it's been a very good season. Yeah,
very much so. I think they've started very, very well. The next question will be, can they maintain it? But as you say, due to that flexibility, it's going to be hard for other teams to stop them. And the reason, usually when you see teams make a really good start, it's because they're playing one way, which has surprised everyone, they're getting good results. Eventually, people will learn how to deal with that, and then that team will fall through the league because teams have learned how to play against them. Due to that, if Vidosic is flexible about it, and I'm sure he will keep adapting and keep changing things, if he does that, then teams won't be able to figure out how he's going to play and then beat him, which then makes it very, very difficult when Brighton turn up. You don't really know how they're going to play, and then you get caught out, and then the results will keep coming. And if Brighton can keep delivering the consistency, they can keep playing well, then there's no reason why this form, why they can't keep getting the results that they're going out and getting. Because they've pulled off some brilliant victories. They've pulled, getting some big points at some big sides. It's all just come together perfectly for Brighton, and everything is clicking right now. The personnel is in form, the tactics are working. Again, the recruitment as well is felt perfect. Every player was pinpointed very well, and they got the players for the roles. They didn't try and force different players into certain positions. They've gone out and they've found the players who can play the perfect Vidosic system, and I mean, it's working perfectly. They're absolutely excelling.
So it all seems rosy, right?
It does.
Well, I'm not going to burst the Brighton bubble, but let's highlight some potential concerns with the system, because in football there are always going to be some issues that need to be addressed. There's always going to be, as we strive for perfection, always going to be a couple issues. So the first I would say has been mixed messages. We've seen this whenever Brighton conceded. This tends to be the reason, or one of the reasons. We've got a couple of things to go through. Because they're so flexible with their shape, I've seen a few times this season where a rogue player will go and press when everyone else is mid-block. Or someone will sit in the mid-block when everyone else has gone high press. Now, the problem with that, and I get why it's occurring, because these players aren't used to playing a system that is very dynamic, because it changes on the fly. The problem with that is it leaves lots of gaps, because if one person presses, then there is space for the opposition to come into, because that person has left the space they were previously occupying. And because everyone else hasn't then pressed up, there is then space for them to play through. It does just leave you a little bit open. And so I think that has been an issue a few times this season. The other thing I think has been a bit of an issue is decision making. I think in the final third, a few times we've seen players not know which pass to go for, not know what the best option is. And again, I think this is because there has been such a strive for possession that they are over-prioritising it at times.
Yeah.
There was one game this season, I can't remember who they were playing against now. I want to say Leicester. Have they played Leicester? I can't remember who it was against. It might have been a cup game, actually. But Frank Kirby picked up the ball, and there was a forward pass on, and rather than trying to execute it, she turns back, knocks it back to a goalkeeper, Bagley, and then they play out from there. And it just feels like an opportunity there where they could have got that ball in behind, could have got a goal, but instead they're prioritising this possession. And I get you want to control possession, because by holding onto the ball, you control games, and then you dictate what happens in that match. So I get why they want to do that. It's what top sides want to do as well. And I think that's what Brighton aspire to be a top side, and right now they look like one. So I get why they're doing it, but I think at times they could be a little bit more incisive in the final third, a little bit more aggressive with how they're attacking. The other issue I'd say is they're a bit error prone at the moment. I think when they're playing out from the back, there has been a few times where they've given the ball away quite cheaply, and while they haven't been punished for it yet, if you give the ball away cheaply against teams like Chelsea, they will punish that. Whereas I think other teams in the league perhaps aren't as clinical in front of goal. I think that has been a key issue. I mean, Manchester United, in the most recent game, Brighton gave the ball away about 2 or 3 times in their own third, and Man United just didn't punish it. And I think you probably get away with it against Arsenal right now, but there are teams in the league that will punish that.
I think it's definitely, those errors are... There are tactical tweaks that need to be made, but you also come down to personnel, especially with the error prone, is that Brighton want to, as you say, they want to hold on to the ball. They want to play the risky possession football in their own penalty area, in their own third. The problem is that when you compare them to the teams who do that, especially your Man Cities, you've got players like Alex Greenwood in that back line. You've got Alexandri who play beautiful football. Thing for Brighton is they don't have the quality to match that, which is why it can be risky when you're trying to play at the back. To be fair, I think they've looked so much more composed than they did last season. Especially some of the players that are still there that have been retained look so much more comfortable. But again, more tweaks, more practice, they will get better at it. And that's the thing, is that they're doing so well, but they are still learning the system. There's still a few players, as you say, with the mixed messages. Still a few players who just are getting to grips with the system. Once they do that, they could be playing even better, and that's slightly scary for the rest of the league. But I do think that they are working on it, and I do think they do have to be a little bit careful with how risky they're being.
Well, when you consider that their system is one of the best in the league, when you consider that on paper they've got players now who are at a very high calibre. You've got players like Nikita Paris and Frank Kirby, who I know are probably past their best now, but they're still top players. And you've got like Guro Bergsvand, who I think is a really strong centre-half. You've got Jocelyn Karabali, who's played at quite a high level. Thoris Dottir, who is a bit more rotation, but still a top player. And I think that Poppy Pattinson, who should be in line for an England call-up if things keep going her way. So I think that they've got the core of a really good squad. Vicky Losada, top WSL midfielder over the last decade. Exactly. So I think you've got players in there who can dictate games, who can control games. And I couldn't sit here and name players all day, but just another one, Bruna Villamaya, who's a part of the Barcelona feminine system. Not a major part, of course. She's now at Brighton. She's a major part of Barcelona. She wouldn't be here, but she was still very good. She still played at a very, very good side, at a very high standard. And that does mean that they can translate that to Brighton quite effectively. And I think that's why they've been so good this season. So yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. And obviously the impact is evident. Brighton sit 4th in the table. They've scored the second most, I believe, in the WSL this season, behind only Chelsea. But Chelsea are pasting teams at the moment. Yeah. So it's hard to keep up with them. They've been unbeaten in all but one match, which of course to current league leaders Manchester City, and they've competed with the likes of City and Manchester United, of course. So everything's pointing to them having a really strong season. They'll probably get through their League Cup group as well. They're looking really good.
They are, and I think it is that is the message that has to be exaggerated, is the fact that they sit 4th and they've already played 2 of the top 4, and that's really strong. That is really, really strong. If they get a point or more out of Chelsea or Arsenal, then that's incredible. Then that would be brilliant work. But I definitely think they'll be eyeing up that 5th spot. I think 4th, I'd be surprised they break into the top 4. But I think while other teams are not playing very well, while Liverpool and Tottenham aren't playing very well, I think that 5th place is up for grabs. And who knows? Could they jump United? Potentially. Could they jump Arsenal if they don't sort themselves out? Potentially. So Brighton, they're performing very well. They're taking advantage of other teams struggling, and it's looking very, very positive.
Yeah, it feels like they've had an easy start to the season, but they haven't when you consider who they've still got to. Their run coming up is really nice. They play Leicester up next this weekend. That for me should be a win based on everything we've seen this season. Then they've got Arsenal, which we don't know how it's going to go right now, but based on how Arsenal are playing, based on the fact they don't have a manager yet, René Slegers, the former assistant, is still in charge. I would back Brighton in that game right now.
It'll be close. I do think it'll be close. If Brighton catch Arsenal on a bad day, then it could get very interesting.
Then they've got West Ham, who are one of the worst teams in the league right now.
Yeah, Brighton tore apart Everton. They could probably do the same to West Ham.
Probably, yeah. Then they've got a League Cup fixture against Leicester. Then they play Chelsea, and that will be very difficult. Then they've got Bristol City in the Women's League Cup, and then they finish this year with Tottenham at home.
That's a really nice run to the new year.
I think bar Chelsea, there's not a game in there I don't think they can win.
Or at least get a point from. I think Arsenal is a player. Yeah. Arsenal, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost, but they could get a point. And also, as you say, Chelsea will also be very difficult. Apart from that, I think they'll be looking to get a point, if not 3, in every other game.
Well, yeah, if they won every game bar Chelsea, they could be on 22 points. Which, considering that City have to play Chelsea in that time, United still have to play Chelsea, there's a chance Brighton could be in the Europe spots come Christmas. Yeah. And that would put them in a really good position going into the second half of the season. They come back with Liverpool and Manchester United, which will be huge tests. Yeah. And if Liverpool do any investment in January, then they should be a good side. Yeah. But it's going to be really interesting. Brighton are in a great position right now. They'll be hoping the good times just keep rolling. Yes. Because they are doing very well. They've also conceded the 3rd least in the league, with only Manchester United and Chelsea conceding less.
Impressive. Very impressive.
And they've played less games, Chelsea and Man United.
Yes, they have.
So interesting stuff.
Very interesting.
But yeah, that is everything then for this video on Vidosic. Feel free to get your comments down below, get involved, give your thoughts on everything we've spoken about in today's video. We are back this weekend with live streams. We're doing 2 this Sunday, I believe. It is Chelsea versus Everton, the late kickoff. And I want to say Manchester City or Manchester United. I can't remember that.
Manchester United, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Neither, but it'll be fun whatever it is, so join us.
I will find out. Manchester United Arsenal.
Yes,
huge game.
How have we forgotten that?
I remember Chelsea Everton, but not Manchester United Arsenal.
Wasn't it national break, honestly?
Yeah, we've forgotten everything. We're just watching England, so no idea what's going on there. If you want to find out what's going on in England, we posted a video on that, and that'll be on screen now, so go ahead and give that a click. Join us for the streams this weekend. We'll be back on Monday with our review of the match week, so go and check that out when it drops. But that's everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.